Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to the IC Topic Chat for July 30th. Here we are at the end of the month, and we're talking about contracting. Topic was originally scheduled for 2 weeks ago, and I had to cancel it kind of at the last moment because I was, I was in a lot of pain. I have this kind of like disturbed nerve in my back, and from rowing and spending time with my kids, which you should do, but it was. It caused some problems, and so I've been to see doctors and things, and I was in so much pain I thought I was actually having a heart attack. I did not have a heart attack. I thought I was having a heart attack. It was really terrible. But I decided to cancel for the day and just focus on getting better for the day. But I was fine the next day. I got medicine, and medicine's amazing. And still dealing with little bits of it, but I think I should be okay. So again, we're talking about contracting today. I do want to say I'm not a lawyer. I do suggest what you end up putting out is something that you have a conversation with a lawyer about. I think that's something I actually need to do, particularly now because we just want a new contract. But I suggest you develop a relationship with a local small business lawyer who can help you out. So I'm just going to talk through some of the things that I've learned. I'm going to give you my layman's perspective. I don't want you to sue me if you don't like what I have to say, because I mean that's actually something we worry about where I am. I'm in Madison County. I'm around the block from Madison County Courthouse, where I'm not joking, millions, if not billions of dollars are decided annually for small claims and against businesses. So we are very concerned about being sued in our county, because this is the place people go. Back in the 1990s, where they had all the tobacco settlements, it happened literally around the corner from me. That's where all the attorneys general from all the states, they all landed here. So I worry about getting sued a lot with everything I do with putting on not only my own small business, but anytime we put on races, we are very concerned about insurance and contracts. So what is a contract? This is something that I picked up from Wikipedia. Legally binding document. That's kind of the key point here. It identifies those duties of the parties to the agreement. A contract typically involves the exchange of goods, services, money, or a promise of any of those. I guess the question is, why are we talking about, or what types of contracts we're talking about? Sometimes they're verbal or implicit, where you say, I'm going to do this for you, and maybe you have it in writing, maybe you don't. We've heard of the old handshake contract. Typically, we're talking about a signed proposal or a letter of agreement, but really you want to get to that point where you have a formal contract between you and your client that's signed by both yourself and your client. And but oftentimes you also have a formal contract that the client has for you. So typically, if I contract with the university in my town, Southern Illinois University at Edwardsville, they have a contract. So what I often do with them, this is very typical, I will write up my evaluation plan and everything that I intend to do, and then they use that as an attachment to that contract. And then we sign it, and they have a whole bunch of stuff about not giving money to Iran, which is language that's placed in all contracts for the state of Illinois as dictated by, our state legislature, something that passed probably through in like 1983. I don't know where it comes from. There's lots and lots of language. It's like 17 pages long. I read through it, and as long as it's not changed, I don't read through it every time, but I do look through that. I often have a formal contract with my client, and that's when they don't have something that they want to give me. They don't have a bunch of requirements. So if I work with the local regional office of education, they don't have something. So typically what I do is I put together a proposal with a signature part at the end and the contract language at the end. And I'm going to show you an example of that in a little bit. Letter of agreement sometimes is just something that's preliminary. It can be used in place of a contract. Signed proposal, that's kind of what I was talking about, the formal contract with the client. But so I'll put together a proposal, they sign it to me, that's a contract, and it has all the contract language in there. And I'm going to encourage you to stay away from verbal or implicit types of contracts. Sometimes if you're doing something really short and you have a long and existing relationship with them, it's not a big deal. I say that's fine, but there's reasons why you don't want to do that. Why are we talking about contracts? So a contract dictates expectations, which is really, really nice. I mean, we really like this. It clarifies your financial relationship. If you're going to be billing them for $12,000 a year, it says, here's $12,000 a year for the next 5 years, total of $60,000. I'm going to bill you quarterly, which would be about $3,000 every 3 months. So that tells you when it's going to happen. If there is litigation, I've never had any issues with litigation. It protects you in that event. You know, why did you do this? Because it outlines these things. It identifies you as a contractor. So this is important too, because if you're doing a lot of existing work for an organization and they ever get audited and they say, why do you have these contractors? Well, you are a contractor. You have a contract in place that identifies you as a contractor and not as an employee. There are people, and there's some bad actors out there that identify contractors, and I'm putting that in quote marks, who are really employees. But there's a checklist, and I think I've talked about this before, that you might want to do with your clients that identifies you as a contractor and not as an employee. One of the main things is that you have control over when you work and how you go about doing your work, and that you own your own materials like your computer and things like that. If they tell you when you need to be there, they want you to work from 8 to 5, you're going to be working on site, things like that, you begin to look like an employee, and that might not go so well in their audit. But having a contract in place that indicates your scope and the things that you're doing is important to identify that. For their own audit, contracting set start and end dates, and all of this provides you a reference in the event of scope creep. If you've ever had a problem with scope creep, and I think we all have, or have had fear about it, we know we can go back to our contracts and say, is what this person asking me to do within the scope of the contract that we laid out? And if it's not, you have that ability to turn around and say, hey, you know, this isn't what we originally said I was going to do. I love it. I want to do it, but maybe we need to talk about an addendum to our contract. So here's all the contracting sections that I identified. I promise you I'm not going to go through all of these. These are here for your reference. And I also want to point out that I put a couple references in the shared drive. And so there are two things. One is something that Gail Barrington put together for her presentation. It's a handout that we have. I think it's finished, and it's all these things are listed there, and they're defined. So they're things you may want to consider. I don't think I know of anybody that will use all of them. But these are all things that you may want to consider. How do you identify which contracting sections you want? I guess at the end of the day, what do you need to make sure you have an agreement with your client about? What are you worried about getting sued for? What are those things that need to be in place based upon some requirement? Those are the sorts of things you put into a contract. Certainly the number one thing, and I think this is alphabetical for the most part. Yeah, it's alphabetical. Is acceptance. It's number one. You want a signature saying this is what's going to happen. So you want to sign it, they want to sign it as well. Here's some of the contracting sections that I use. So I love to start with a background. Let's see here if I can find my contract that I put together. So here's one that we're using for assuming you can see this. If you can't see it, let me know. This is a panelist contract because it's not for my business, it's for the Evaluation Association of St. Louis, which I'm the president of. And we're putting together like an online conference. I like to summarize what's going to happen and give a description and just some background, right? What are the expectations that we have for our panelists? Those are the people who are going to be speaking at the event. Here's the amount that they are going to get paid. So we're doing it based upon a percentage of the gross revenue. we outline, it's going to change. Like, I don't know exactly how much they're going to get paid. We won't know until we have figured out all the revenue. And what happens in case of cancellation, the fact that we're going to record. We have expectations for our panelists. I'll put them over here. Let's see here. The expectations are things that we expect them to do. We want them to connect ahead of time. We want them to be a part of our dry runs. We want them to moderate a 50-minute breakout session. So this is just for a one-day thing. So this is a pretty small contract. It's not a big deal. One thing that I also want to point out here, like, we want to make sure that they have decent audio visual because they're on a Zoom call. Probably shouldn't be a problem, but it's one of those things that I know could be a problem, and they could say, well, you never told me. If you worry about those things, you want to make sure it's in the contract. I think my understanding of how most contracts get really long is people have mistakes that happen over years, and then like, well, we got to add that into the next contract, and then the contract ends up 2 pages and 5 pages and 15 pages, and it just keeps going from there. So sometimes I think it makes sense to revisit the long ones. But here's the acceptance. Notice how I didn't sign it yet. You don't want to sign it and send a contract off to somebody that they can edit, because if they edit it and you don't go back and review it, then you're now bound to whatever they typed into there and signed. So don't sign a contract until you know that it's the same thing that you have. If they edit it, then you need to know that. Let's see. Rates and costs and invoice schedule. I didn't put the invoice schedule in here. That's another thing. So it's all there. So I say I'm going to invoice you every 3 months on the quarterly basis. Usually for me that's January 1st. It's January 1st, April 1st, July 1st, and October 1st. So it's just a typical quarter. Sometimes that's not necessarily the case. Sometimes I do it on a monthly basis. Another way that I like to do my invoicing, I'll do it based upon deliverables. Once I finish this piece of my project, I will invoice you. So on a monthly basis, when I deal with shorter projects, or another really typical contractual way of doing it is I want half up front. I'm going to do my project. You're going to love it, and as soon as you love it and it's all finished, you could pay me the second half. So I get half of it up front, and something goes wrong, at least I got half. So let's see here. Here's my 5.5 pieces of advice for you for contracts. Don't work until the contract is finalized. Seriously, I'm probably the worst offender of this, because, like, for instance, right now we have an NSF grant that was funded in June. It doesn't even technically start till October 1st, but they're already recruiting students because they have a school year starting and they want to get ahead of schedule, and they've been given permission to do it. So what am I doing? I'm helping them out. Am I going to get a contract? Absolutely. Have I been working with them for 2 years to get this thing funded? Absolutely. Do I worry about it? Not at all. But so there's an example of when you break this rule. But my advice generally, if you're working for a smaller project and you don't necessarily know what you're supposed to be doing, you have to finalize this contract, because it's not about the contract. It's an agreement on what you intend to do, and they've signed off on it, and now you know what you're supposed to do, and now you know that you're going to get paid. Let's see. Get it in writing, right? So that's not just a verbal contract. It's all in the writing, and they sign off on it. Don't forget about your IP. So IP, if you don't know what that acronym is, that's intellectual property. Oftentimes with your NSF grants, like what I have a lot of, it's all listed out there in the data management plan. But if it's not there, who owns these data? Now for me, for the most part, my clients own my data. I'm perfectly happy with that. In fact, I love it, because then I'm not required to know how it's stored. If something goes wrong, it's on them. So it's their data. But if you have products that you're putting out there, things that are owned by your business, you have something that you want to protect, you better put it in there, because they're going to have an expectation that they can reuse it. Once you figure this out, develop your boilerplate. A boilerplate, if you don't know what it is, it's the same, basic document that you keep going back to and you add and subtract things from. So for the most part, that boilerplate is something you probably want to work out with a local small business lawyer. And they're going to say, here's what you should be using, and here's the yellow areas that you're going to change their name, you're going to change the amounts, you're going to change the term, some of these terms, but most of these terms are going to stay the same. I want you to know this is really important. You're working with your large organizations. They're going to have all kinds of stipulations in their contract to you. Know this, if you don't like what it says, you can request changes to your client's boilerplate. Their boilerplate, oftentimes, like I said, with the state of Illinois, they'll have the 17 pages about not giving money to Iran. Well, I don't have any intent to do that. But one thing that's very typical in there is they talk about your insurance requirements. I've talked to Southern Illinois University, the other one in Carbondale, and I heard their contract officer tell me people often ask for a lower limit on their liability insurance. I thought that was really interesting because I more than met it. But one thing you definitely want to do if you're a one-person shop is make sure that there's not a stipulation in there for workman's compensation insurance. We talked about that last week. Workers' compensation insurance is not required for a small business of one because you don't need to cover yourself for workers' compensation. But those contracts that they have, their boilerplates often will require it. So I would go in there, I would talk with people, and I would put a line through that, and I'd put my initials next to it, and they would initialize it as well. Let's see here. And the insurance requirements, that's your 5.5. So I would say you want to have the workers' compensation, you want to take a look at the Consulting Startup and Management book that Gail put out. By the way, I think that the price has been dropped on Amazon. It was like over $100, and that's because they started to have a lower stock. We've Ann and I both made a question to the editors, and I think they're going to start producing some more because they're starting to run out, so the prices are going to go up. But if you want to get it, I think the price has gone down now, and if it's still super high, let us know. We'll see what we can do. But chapter 16, it's all about contracting. It's great stuff. Also, make sure to take a look at, like I said, the drive. I'll show it afterwards. I'll show some of these things, but take a look at the shared drive because it's got two things. There's actually another thing that was a boilerplate that somebody suggested on the Eval E group years ago, and they put it out there. It was one of our colleagues, and forgetting the name of the person who put it out there, but it's a really wonderful boilerplate that anybody could use that was offered up for free to anyone. And with that, thanks for listening. Know that our next upcoming session next week will be with Stephanie Evergreen and Nina Sabar. They're going to be talking about their chapter on branding. If you're signed up for the session, I will send you their article that they put in the December 2019 special edition on independent consulting, and the special edition of the New Directions for Evaluation. And just confirmed today with Susan Wolf, she's going to be presenting on selecting professional associations for networking and benefits. That's our formal title. I think she informally said something like, what's worth the money, or something like that. Selecting professional association, where do you want to spend your bucks? Something like that. Anyway, with that, thanks everybody for attending today, and I look forward to chatting.